Very excited to have Judge Naaman with us for a number of reasons. Did some research on him. I could talk all day long about that, so just appreciate him. Assuming he's going to share with us a little bit about the innovation he's brought to juvenile court, and I'm looking forward to hearing for that. The thing I appreciate the most about him is that, he went to his church first before he came to our church, that he's a faithful member of his local congregation as a follower of Christ. Judge Naaman, please come and share with us, and we welcome your wife. We're glad she could be with us as well.
Thank you so much.
Well, I can't tell you what a pleasure it is to be here today. And the first thing was to see the children lined up here. And my wife and I today are having our first services that we've celebrated without at least one of our children with us in the last 21 years because we are empty nesters now. And my son is a senior at the University of Alabama, and my daughter is a freshman. She was recently in a very nice sorority. She went through the whole thing, and then now she's been her real first week at school. And I'll ask you to pray for Marcel and I first because this is hard. Especially hard on the bank account, but pray for us also. Pray for my daughter. The angst and the youth is a very hard time, and she's having a hard time right now because we raised her, and the schools that she went to raised her in a certain type of values and what is expected. When you go to a big university with 30,000 people, not everybody shares those values, and she's scared right now, and she feels like she should have a whole group of friends, and she doesn't really have all her friends because her lifelong friends have gone to other schools like Auburn and all across the country. And she's having a hard time. It's that angst. It's that uncertainty of becoming an adult because now she's at that stage. So I ask you to pray for her, pray for us, as we sit there and talk to her and try to counsel her and tell her things are going to be better. That's pretty much my job. It's harder when you're doing it for someone that you're so close to and you love so much. But I love all of these children. But really, that's my job, is to try to make them feel and tell them and try to share my experience. Really, my experience as a Christian man, that life can be better, that it looks low and it looks problematic right now, and it may seem hopeless to you, but it's not hopeless. When I sit and hear Pastor, what you do and what this church does, it's so simple. Just a simple thing of a pair of undies. Can you imagine what a child must be going through and the struggles they must be feeling when a gift of a pair of undies can make all the difference in their lives? Can you imagine? Can you imagine when someone can just say something that might make a difference in their life, might bring hope, one little gift, of kindness that can make all the difference to them? I once had a young man in my courtroom, and he was 15 years old actually, and he lived in a home with his mother who had a debilitating disease where she could not get around much. And mother had just separated from the only man that he knew as his father. He had not known his real father, and this man had been involved in his life for a number of years. And they lived in very real poverty. They were struggling. It was him and his brother and his mother who was just really struggling. And for whatever reason, they had no family, nobody to lean on. And this was a young man that stayed up at night, like watching infomercials so he could find ways, to make money for their household. They were poor and they were really hopeless. One day he skipped school and got with the wrong person who brought a half-gallon of whiskey, and believe it or not, they drank that whole half-gallon. And in his angst and in his uncertainty and in his pain, he reached for a gun that his mama had kept in the house for protection, and he was shooting the house up. Shooting everything. If mama comes home, he's still shooting up the house. And he was brought to me, and I could not wait to tear into him, hearing what he had done. First of all, missing school. Second of all, getting so intoxicated that he was a danger, not only to himself, but to others. And I really let him have it. And then I saw him, and he was just shrinking down in his chair, just got smaller and smaller and smaller. And he told me something that to a certain degree I hear all the time among my children. In one form or fashion, it's what I hear so overwhelmingly. I'm sorry, Judge. The world is against me. The world is against me. Oh, my goodness. That touched my heart because the world very much was against him. Everything in his life right there seemed to be hopeless. Everything. You know, to a certain degree, like I say, I hear that every day in my children. When you see that 92% of the children that I have to handle every day come from a single-parent home, right? Where there's just one person, and many times it's not a parent. Many times it's a grandmother that's having to raise many children, 5, 6, 7, 8, if you can believe, children at one time. You know, across Mobile County, not just the children that I deal with, I have 41% of the children just across Mobile County are born to a single-parent home. Well, what is a single-parent home like? What does that look like? You know, well, it looks like many times a family that lives in poverty, because almost an equal number of the children that I deal with live in poverty, and I mean extreme poverty. If you can imagine a family of 4 bringing in less than $15,000, can you imagine that? That's extreme poverty. And many of my children live like that. You know, across the county, 23% of white children live in poverty and come from a single-family home. 23% come from a single-parent home. Among the African-American children in our community, 66%. So 41%, if you can imagine. So what does it look like? Well, it looks like a family that's under great stress. Whoever that caregiver is, it's going to be stressful. It means that they're not able to get the kind of housing that they need. And so they're going to live in a very dangerous area where there's going to be guns and violence everywhere. It means that they're not going to eat, Pastor, like you said. That little bit of what you buy at Walmart to bring back to give them a meal. Do you know how worried that I am during the summer? And when you say, why do you worry during the summer, Judge? During the summer, the children don't have a breakfast and a lunch that could be provided for them. And I worry that they're starving. Food insecurity in this county is one of the highest in the state. We have 6,000 children in Mobile County right now that are homeless. And that's, I think, a very conservative estimate. So what does that mean? Are they living in our parks? Are they living, on the street? Well, some of them are. Some of them are. But the majority are just moving from place to place to place. No stability in their lives. Principal knows that, and she knows how hard it can be to deal with that when a child is moved from place to place. Just when you get settled and you've got people that love them and care about them and are going to work with them, get settled and to meet some of the deficiencies that a child growing up like that might have. Just when you do it, they're off to another school. And we have children that sometimes move 5 and 6 and 7 times different schools. It's horrible. 3,500 kids, and again, I think that's a conservative estimate, are not going to school and not working. Now, let me ask you this. What is going to befall them? What's going to happen? What are they doing when they're not? Well, we know what they're doing, and we know the dangers. And not only they are dangerous to themselves, but of course they're going to be a danger to us. If we don't meet their needs, if we don't take care of what we must for their lives, what are they going to do? And you know what they're going to do. And yet, our children, they're brave and they're resilient. No matter what they do, I see such greatness in them. Can you imagine a child coming from a home? Right now, let's talk about a home that's in poverty. Well, I'll know what. My air conditioner, when I woke up this morning, was at 72 degrees, and I was practically cold. And I was cold. But I want you to think about that child that's living in poverty, and you got them all around you. Principal knows, and she's got them in her school. And they don't have electricity right now. So I can't even imagine what their home is like, the heat, the humidity, right? First of all, just the basic comfort. But what about the food? I will tell you, many of my children that I'm dealing with live out of an ice chest, and they go buy a bag of ice, and they keep whatever they can so they can keep it cold. Can you imagine living like that? And probably every night they hear gunshots, and probably every night somebody is harmed and something bad is happening around them. That is our children. But guess what? They get up every day and they face the odds, the almost impossible odds, and believe that maybe it'll get better, or at least we hope they'll believe that. Through your actions, through your works, you give them a chance to believe that. But that is the very reality. Let me tell you when I first became involved in this, and when I first really saw it. I'm going to tell you my talk is through stories about people, about children, about that young man that says the world is against me. The first time when I was a prosecutor, and I told you now this is my first service, my first Sunday in 21 years of not being with my children on Sunday. Well, my child, when my son was born, Blaze, and he was 21, and he was just a little baby, and I was working, I was an assistant DA, and I was working on this really tough case. And my very first big case, murder case, very high profile. Everybody, if I did bad, everybody was going to know it. And I had been working, literally for months on this case, and I'd spent a lot of long nights, and my wife was getting a little bit tired of it, because I would come home late, and you're not even seeing Blaze. And, I love Blaze. The world was Blaze to me. He was my first. I loved him. But I was really working, hard. And I remember she called me because I had promised I'm not going to stay late. It was a Friday. It was in November, and it was cold. And I told her, I'm going to come home, and I'm going to cook you dinner because I know you're a little upset with me. I know I hadn't been pulling my weight. I know I hadn't really seen my son the way I need to. I'm going to come home, and I'm going to make dinner. And so it was like 7 o'clock and then 8 o'clock, and I'm still working, trying to get everything together for a big Monday trial. And she calls me, and she says, Blaze is waiting to see you, and it's 9 o'clock now. And plus, I'm hungry. Come on home. And so, November, I put on my heavy coat, and I grabbed up all my books, and I walked out to the car, and I go to the nearest grocery store, which used to be as if in Mobile. If you know anything about Mobile, I know you do, but on Government Street, there's a Winn-Dixie, and it had been there for a long time. Well, in those days, 21 years ago, it was called Crack Dixie, right? Because it was a bad place. It was real dark and real dank, and you really kind of taking your life in your hands if you went into that place, because it was kind of dangerous. It really was. Real nice now, we call it the Mac Dixie, Pastor, because it's all bright and nice and fun. But then it was kind of scary. So anyway, I go into the store, and in my coat, it's chilly outside, and I go and pick up the 2 biggest steaks and potatoes that I could find because Marcel was hungry and I needed to really make it up to her, right? And so I go to I go up to the line, and I'm just looking and thinking how I've got to get home, and it's a long line, but in front of me is this little boy. Now this has left an impression on me, but this little boy, now I'm in my heavy coat, I've got these 2 huge steaks and 2 big potatoes, and I am getting ready to eat, and life is good for me. And I got my little son at home and my wife waiting for me. Life could not be any better for me. And here's this little boy. Now, he's wearing a T-shirt, and I'm in a heavy jacket. And he is wearing, I still remember, these tattered green gym shorts. And they're tattered, and I don't even remember if he wear a pair of shoes. That's all I remember, except one thing. Well, I got these steaks and I got these potatoes. He's got a little can of chili. You know the little flip top? You flip the top, that little can of chili. And I'm looking down at my steaks, and I'm looking down at my potatoes. I'm looking at this little boy, and I'm thinking to myself, God, why do I have to see this? Why do I have to see this? How am I going to enjoy what I'm eating looking at this little guy like this? Why do you have to put this in my vision? I did not want to see this. I got to get home. My wife's waiting for me. I want to go see my son. I want to go eat. Why did I have to see this? And I thought, the only thing I can do, what can I do? Only thing I can do. He has a taste for chili. I'm going to get him some chili. So I go back and I buy him like 3 big old cans of chili. Right? I think, well, that'll make me feel better. That'll be good for him. 3 big old cans. And I brought them back to him and said, son, I'm going to pay for these. And he looked up at me with the saddest little eyes. I don't have a can opener. Don't have a can opener. So I rush back and I get all the little cans of chili that I can hold, and I bring them back to him, and I tell him, I'm going to pay for this. You go on. And so the little lady rang it up, and he got out the door. And as he left, and after I had a chance to compose myself, I thought to myself, why did I let him go? Why did I let him go? To appease my need to get home and get fed and see my family and to lessen the blow of what I had just seen. Why did I let him go, though? And, you know, after I checked out, I go out and look around, and he was nowhere to be found. And I'm thinking to myself, why? I was an assistant DA. I could have called somebody. I should have called somebody. I wasn't thinking. I was just trying to take care of my basic needs, and I didn't want to see it. And I literally did not want to see it, but it was right there in front of me. I had a chance to be a miracle in his life, and I turned, and I failed. When I had a chance to do something special, I failed. Why did I let him go? And that haunted me, and to this day, Pastor, it haunts me. And I think about what happened to that child. Was that a child that I could have changed? Was that a child that I could have taken out of a desperate situation and not feed him for a few minutes, but feed him for a lifetime? I lost him. I lost that opportunity. When God put the opportunity for me to be a miracle in his life, I failed God. I failed myself, and I failed him. You know, it left an impression on me later that one day, if I ever had the opportunity, I was not going to fail again. I would at least try my best. I did not ever want to fail. You know, later on, I had this young man, and he's 12 years old, and he got in trouble for selling drugs at school. And my wife and I were watching on the news, and I said, 12-year-old selling drugs. You know, I'm saying I can't, you know, because I get a preview about work. If I watch the 10 o'clock news, and that's why I don't hardly watch it anymore. I don't want to see what I'm going to have to face the next day. But it was a 10 o'clock news, and this young man, 12 years old, from a school on DIP, had been arrested for selling drugs. And oh my goodness, when I heard that, Marcel looked at me. Oh my goodness, a 12-year-old selling drugs to our children. He's a child himself. And I was so mad, and that little boy came in, I remember the day, and I was just waiting for him, right? And I was going to fuss at him, and I was going to tell him what's what, about how he's destroying himself and how he's destroying others, and how could he be so selfish, you know? So he walks in, and I'm ready to let him have it. But then he's just the cutest thing you ever saw, right? And he's swallowed up in our little gym, you know, we have a little jumpsuit that they have to wear, and he's just swallowed up, and he's crying, and he's hunched over, much like the kid that I described earlier. He is just crying. Tears are just streaming down. And I learned very quickly that he's just the cutest little thing. But he lived in one of the most dangerous areas of town on DIP, right, where there's violence all around. And he lived with his 80-plus-year-old grandmother, and they lived in extreme poverty. That's what I came to know later. I mean, and I'm talking extreme poverty. And he grew up not having all the things that the other kids want and did have. Certainly not what my children were exposed to. And he wanted those things, and he wanted them bad. His mother, in and out of the house, never really a factor in his life. And his father, he didn't even know. And so when a 40-year-old man in the neighborhood saw this young man, his name DeMarcus, he knew he had his hook. DeMarcus was somebody who liked nice clothes. He wanted to dress nice. He wanted to go to church looking nice. He wanted a nice haircut. He wanted an Xbox. He wanted a TV. Just check off the list that all our kids want. To some degree, we've given them. But he had no means to have that. He had no means to have even the bare necessities of life. And when that 40-year-old man saw it, he took advantage of him. And he was in my court. And in 6 short months, we were able to turn his life around because we had some very good people that were working. We increased and improved his performance in school. We gave some stability to his life. We helped his grandmother, how she could work and work with him and keep him out of trouble. We gave him a whole litany of services that really made a difference, I think. And when 6 months was over, his grandmother was so proud, and she came storming into my courtroom and telling me, Judge, I'm so proud of DeMarcus. I'm so thankful for what y'all did for him. I just can't tell you. And, you know, you don't have a lot of people. Jesus knew that. You don't have a lot of people that thank you when something good goes. You always hear about the bad. But I said, okay, well, I brought him in my office, and we had a nice, long conversation. And we talked about what his hope and dreams were and what he wanted the future to be for him. And then they left. And then not more than 15 minutes later, I got a telephone call. My secretary says, DeMarcus on the phone. I said, DeMarcus? I just talked to him 15 minutes ago. I said, hey, DeMarcus, what's going on? He goes, Judge, my grandmother's so proud that you're proud of me, and she said I could go to the fair. It was October then. And I said, well, great, DeMarcus. Well, what can I do for you? He said, well, my uncle was going to take me, but he doesn't have any room in the car. And the one neighbor that my grandmama believes in or trusts me to go with, he's not going. And I said, oh, DeMarcus, I'm so sorry. I said, well, what can I do for you? He goes, I was just wondering, Judge, what you doing tonight? And I will tell you, at the time, I wanted to laugh too, and I did chuckle. But at the same time, almost instantaneously, almost at that very same time, I'm laughing and I want to cry. Because here is an example of all the problems that are going on in our community right now. Here's a young man that is looking for good. His grandmother's looking for good. We want to be around good. Right? The whole reason he got in trouble was because he was not around good. That the other people had taken advantage of that. Here's a good kid that had done bad things because he couldn't find good. When you have an absence of good, the evil rushes in. It's like a vacuum, and it's insidious, and it destroys. Because they don't have the good. Well, that night I couldn't take him to the fair. But later on, myself and Chief Lawrence Batiste, who was my chief of probation then, but now is the chief of the Mobile County or Mobile Police Department, we took turns and we took him in. And we just really got to work with him. And it was just little things. We took him to our house for dinner. I took my son and them out, and we would go places together. We just made him feel special, and we gave him some outlets. We didn't do a lot, and it wasn't that much. But just a little made such a huge difference. And maybe it was that little that kept him out of trouble from making that decision, that bad decision again. It was just sharing. Something that I do to my children every day. Something that my father did for me and all the teachers and my mother and my wife, holding out their hand and saying, I'm not going to let you fail. I'm not going to let you be hopeless. I'm not going to let you give up. Life is better. It will be better. And I'm going to walk it with you. I was going to tell you another story, but Pastor, I know I only have limited time. But I do want to tell you, it changed my life, and it changed my thinking. Because it's not only to be able to give to everybody the best services that we have, and we have great services. I knew that I could only do a small percentage. When I say when I mean Andrea and all the wonderful people that work at the youth center, because I do such a small part. I'm sort of the gatekeeper. I do such a small part. It's so many great people. But we can only accomplish, so much. And then we're out of it because we can't be that. I can't do for all the children, the thousands of children, what I was able to do for DeMarcus. God just put DeMarcus before me. He let me see them. And every day, you hear all the statistics that I told you, right? And we can say, oh, what a shame. And you might not be moved to action because we just hear those statistics all the time. But let me tell you what we have to see. What Andrea sees, what we all see that work at the youth center, we have to see their eyes. And in seeing their eyes, we make a connection. And we see the hurt. And I'll tell you what, when you make a connection through the eyes, you can feel the pain. It's almost like it comes right into you. And when you do that, you can't turn away. It's like that little boy at Winn-Dixie. You just can't turn away. So I'm here to talk about a program. I could tell you about a program that is an outstanding one, and I think God helped us create that because some of the most incredible people at the most serendipitous time came into my life at a time that I did not want those people to come into my life. I had other things to do. I had more important things to do, but God put me in a position, in a place, and I complained about it all the way to going to it, but then I met people that helped change my whole life, my whole mission, our court. Because what they did, and through their work, and through me meeting them, it later grew into a program called NEST. And NEST is a program called Nurturing Children. It stands for Nurturing Children, Equipping Parents, Strengthening Families, and Transforming Communities. And believe me, it absolutely does that. Because what it does, it works as groups of individuals get together, and they come together. And they work with the court. The court can do good things. We have wonderful programs. We can bring a child to where that child needs to be and a family to where they do. But we can't be that mother, that father, that big brother, that big sister, that concerned person, that person that will reach out the hand. We can't follow them all that way. And what NEST does is strictly and just simply does that. Because it's a group of people, 4 to 6 people that get together and work with a family, a court-involved youth, and their parents. And they help them overcome barriers and obstacles. And let me tell you what they do. They take from what we're able to do. We had a young person, I'll give you a perfect example. The first Nest team ever formed was for a young man. He was in the 7th grade, and he had failed out of school, and he had missed 80 days of school. He had been suspended 19 times because of his bad behavior. He had lived in poverty on the same kind of area, like in by Denton School in Mobile. He lived in a really kind of dangerous area. Mama had 2 other children, and he took care of his 2 siblings, but he would never go to school. His mama would go work 2 jobs, 2 shifts at a restaurant called Cheddar's Restaurant, and then, so she couldn't be there in the morning. He'd have to get his siblings up to school, and then he wouldn't go, and he'd stay. So he was failing, and he was doing horrible. A Nest team came. Well, first of all, we got him involved in our truancy program, and we worked with them over the summer, and we really corrected his bad behavior, and we really corrected his truancy. When I saw him in September, he was doing perfect attendance and no problems in school when he had 19 suspensions the year before. But what was happening? He's failing everything because educationally he was really way behind. And so we formed a Nest team around this kid. We improved his grades. We got him into sports and into positive things, and he made good friendships that he had never had before. It made a total difference. His mama lost her job when Cheddar's closed their door. You remember that, Cheddar? You heard overnight, right close to Christmas, they closed their doors. They got together, that team, and they got a resume together for her. They networked some of their friends, and they got her a job within a week of losing her job. Those 3 children would have been some of the 6,000 that were homeless in Mobile County without the work of this team. And what is so beautiful about the team? It is many hands make light work. It doesn't put too much of a burden on any one person, but they work in teams, and it's really doable. We have other great programs, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, wonderful one-on-one mentoring program. Doesn't work with court-involved youth, but does great work, and I'm so proud of what they do. And Boys and Girls Club, all kinds of great programs. But sometimes we don't, and we lack those people that will just share their social capital, share their love, share their faith with a family that feels helpless and desperate. And I am seeing tremendous things happen. I tell you what, let me close it on this. And if you're interested in knowing more about Nest, because I'm just telling you real quick in a very short period of time, if you're interested, we're having a breakfast, and I'll let Pastor know, and I'll let Andrea know that breakfast will be at the original Oyster House. It's free if you'd like to come and hear more about it. If you'd like to get a group of your friends together, maybe form a team. Maybe the church might want to form a team. I know this is a very faith-filled and outreach-oriented church, and I think you would be wonderful if you might like to do that for a child that's here in Chickasaw, a family that might need you here. But I told you that story in the beginning. I started off with a young man that said, "The world is against me, Judge," and he was slinking, and he was slinking, and he was slinking. And I'm going to just tell you, just that little bit of words. I said, look at your life. Look all around you. Look at you shot up the house. Your mama came home, you're still shooting up the house. But look at what is before you. Everything you love, everything that you treasure is still alive. Nothing you have done now cannot be undone. The world may be against you, son, but God is surely with you. And just that little bit of phrase, just that looking it and turning it in a little different direction. I mean, I was all planned to just fuss and beat down and denigrate, but just turning it just a little bit. God is with you, and God was with him. And that's really all he needed to hear. Just those little bit of words started the beginning of a healing. For like I said, many of our children are out there facing, and they're hurting, and they believe the world is against them. If they're going to see God, and I say this all the time, especially in church, if they're going to see God, Pastor, if they're going to see God, they're only going to see him through us. And we've got to commit ourselves that we're going to do God's work, and you do God's work every day, and I thank you for doing it. Thank you, Pastor.